I am Cedia.
I am Cedia.
I am Cedia.
This is the Cedia podcast.
I think just, they're all tools, aren't they? Everything we use is tools, TCD or any of that, but there is just no substitute really by getting, I've learned more from these standards groups just by listening to some smart people and being on the calls, and I just make notes and I take it away with me and make sure I'm prepared for TCD. And I just would implore those people to get involved as well. I think I echo what Walt said. If there are people out there that feel strongly enough about this industry and passionate enough about this industry, to give your time and to come on these calls, you'll learn far more. You'll take away far more than possibly you give. I know I do.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cedia podcast. My name is Ed Wank. Our co-host, as always, with Cedia is Walt Zerbe. Walt, how you doing?
Hey, Adam. Good, thank you.
Ian Bryant, are you going to turn into the permanent third co-host here?
I'd love that. This is great.
You've been on quite a few of these, but you're on this one for a very specific reason. We're going to talk about the Cedia designer, TCD, and the inventor of TCD joins us as well, Mr. Guy Singleton. Guy, how are you?
Hi, Ed. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here again. Thanks.
Nice to have you aboard. And Anthony Grimani joins us once again from PMI, the audio legend himself. Anthony, how you been?
I'm feeling legendary today.
Good.
And yourself?
Good. I'm feeling less than legendary, so I'm going to let you guys carry the bucket. So we're going to talk about TCD. We're going to talk about some of the updates, and we're going to talk about performance facts. And I'm going to turn this over to Walt for a bit, because I've been hearing this term a lot. Can you define it for those who are not up to speed, what you're talking about here? What are the specifics, and why is all this important, sir?
Yeah, so I'll just give a brief history as well, and Anthony will be part of this. So Anthony, 5-6 years ago, we met in Amsterdam with Guy and myself and a whole bunch of other people, and Anthony presented a vision of something that he called performance facts at the time, and basically what it is something that our industry needs. And it's something that we just now really began to seriously move on. And we've moved on it through the R10 group, which is Cedia's standards group that is also partnered with the CTA. And basically, in a nutshell, systems need to be designed, and you need to have proper information about a speaker or an amplifier or whatever device you're using to be able to design with it. And a lot of the products we have today that we buy in the channel does not have enough information to design with it. I'll just give you an example of a speaker. It goes 50 to 20K, 50 hertz to 20K, plus or minus 3 dB. It weighs 120 pounds, and it's 48 inches tall, and it handles 200 watts. That's not nearly enough information to know, will that speaker work right in this particular immersive audio space that I'm designing that needs to cover this many seats, is this much cubic volume, and blah, blah, blah. So this whole effort is to define the minimum amount of specifications we need to have on a particular device, and then what tests should be used to provide that information. And then we will, in turn, talk to manufacturers to say, look, you need to give us this information because we need it so we can actually design with your product. Anthony, Guy, you guys want to chime in on that? Tried to be really concise. It's a long topic.
It is indeed a long topic. And it just comes down to giving the tools to a Cedia designer to do a good job. And what is a good job? Well, the client says, I want this result, and we in the Cedia space are representing, we'll deliver that result. This is the trade. We'll give you a result, you give us money. And that's the contract. Right now, that result is really challenging to achieve because the manufacturer is not giving the designer enough information to go do a good job with the result. And it's all about trying to resolve that. The little backstory around this is many years ago I was doing a project for a residential contractor, but that happened to get a little commercial gig to help one of their clients out. And in the commercial gig, they used the same brand of equipment they were using on the residential side that happened to have a commercial outlet. And all of the data sheets for the same products, but reformatted for the commercial side, had all this engineering data that allowed me, a designer, to calculate the thing to within a decibel, just like really accurately. And there's like, wait a minute, how does this manufacturer give us all the stuff on their data sheets on the commercial side, but not on the residential side? And that got me thinking. And it's ultimately a chicken and egg. Just be honest with you, the answer has, when I ask this question of manufacturers, it's usually like, well, the residential contractors don't know what to do with more engineering data. They've never asked for it. And we figured we wouldn't clutter the marketing data with all of this stuff. It's like, well, that's not true. We want this. Well, nobody's asking for it. And then you go to residential contractors, like, well, we don't get it. So we just kind of, I don't know, we fudge it. And so in this chicken and egg, something had to break. And it's basically go, well, let's just get everybody on the same page, agree what the data should be, agree to how it's presented in a non-judgmental way, and just present it. Now, the program is called Performance Facts because it was also inspired by noticing that every item of food in most countries of the world has a nutrition fact label on it. And those nutrition facts are consistent. The data is always in the same place. Hopefully they're measured the same way, so that if one manufacturer says this thing, or one food supplier says this thing has so many carbs, it really is the real number. We have to trust somewhere along the way that the tests are consistent. But I was just struck, for my work, I travel a fair amount internationally. I was struck that I could be in front of a food item in China or in England or in Mongolia, and it says right on there those nutritional facts, yet we can't get a speaker to tell us what the basic performance facts are. So trying to break that stalemate and say, okay, let's all agree to what we're going to disclose. It's voluntary. It's not judgmental, and it's always presented in the same way, so that a CEDIA designer can just compare 5 data sheets and go, okay, for what I'm trying to do for this client, this is going to have the right combination of data points.
Got it. Walt, you had your hand up.
Well, I think I'm kind of going to be steamrolling into the next question that we had. So I was going to be defined when Anthony said to get a result. The result that we're talking about, there's actually 4 of them. So we have another effort, and I know you wanted me to explain a little bit about the group. So once again, there's a group called R10, and I know you're like, why do they call it R10? This group is a joint group between CEDIA and the CTA that focuses on the installation of technology. And the CTA had other previous R groups. They still do. R3 is audio, R4 is video. So this one just sequentially became R10. And that they're both ANSI accredited. That's the CTA and CEDIA. And CEDIA is now running this group, and it's a great group. And we talk about all things installed. And we need great minds, and we're always looking for great minds. So if you may be interested in listening to this call, please reach out to CEDIA, and we'll put some contact information in the liner of this podcast, because we can always use more help. So we have another effort called RP22, which is the multi-channel audio room design recommended practice. That rolls right off the tongue. And there are 4 levels in that particular paper of performance. And the very first level is what we consider the minimum that someone should design an immersive audio system to be able to meet the creator's intent. And then the level 4 is cost no object, state of the art. There'll be very few of these rooms in the world. And that's what Tony was getting to with the performance facts. If you're trying to design a system for a level 1 or level 2, you have to know you're going to meet it. So that's where the performance facts rolls in to the recommended practice for the multi-channel audio.
So question, Walt, do these different levels, it's not delineated by cost, it's delineated by specifically performance, correct?
I'm so glad you asked that, Ed.
All right.
No.
Okay.
And this has been a problem in our industry.
Fair.
There has been little benchmark between, let's say, 3 proposed systems that a customer is getting. One might cost a whole bunch more, and people may specify more than design, and they may use more expensive product, but it doesn't mean that the product is going to do a better job. In fact, it could do a worse job. So it levels the playing field from a job being done on a cost basis on being done on a performance basis, which is exactly what jobs should be done. When I'm a consumer and I want a system, and I know I want it to at least meet the director's intent, I know I'm going to get that, and there's 4 levels of it. So it's really a great thing all the way around for everybody.
Ian wanted to get in here. Ian, go ahead.
Well, I just thought that this would be a perfect opportunity as performance facts and then cinema grades are explained, to have Guy explain how that then translates into TCD, and his analogy that I absolutely love about the lobster pots and the type of restaurant you're going to eat at, and that analogy, Guy, if you can explain that, I think it would really help wrap all this up.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, the way I sort of describe it when I'm discussing it to either manufacturers that I reach out to, or, maybe somebody on some training, is I talk about, the R10 or the RP22 as being the recipe. This is a peer-reviewed standard that the greatest minds in the industry have deemed to be, if you follow this simple recipe, you will have a predictable outcome. Grades, I always look at that and say, look, you can have a McDonald's drive-through, or you can go for a Michelin star restaurant. So the grade is really saying, what performance objective, what is your desired outcome? Because if 4 or 5 people on this call were to design a theatre, then the likelihood is we would all of us would come back with something a little different. So, some may well be sort of $50,000, and some may be upward of probably $1 million. And the final thing is the quality of the ingredients. So, if you have tinned salmon or fresh Scottish salmon, then obviously those two ingredients are different. So the analogy that I use is the recipe, the quality of the ingredient, and then obviously the desired outcome, and then, just tagging on a little bit for TCD at the end, which is, effectively the chef, which is going to try to help to put all this together in the right order with the right kind of ingredient, and hopefully the right outcome. And the little bit that Ian mentioned there about the lobster pots was really about going out to manufacturers and saying, we need your data, and leaving them with a desired list of data that we need. And then after a while, those people will curate and deliver that data to us. And I think that's what Ian meant about the lobster pots there. So
all right.
I hope that's the analogy that I use. I'm sure people will describe it differently.
So I have 2 questions for you, gents. So firstly, what data do you need? What data is absolutely critical that you need to have manufacturers supplying you? And second, there's another problem with some audiovisual gear, I know, especially in the audio universe, that not only do you not have enough data, but oftentimes it's wrong because somebody is trying to make their product look better than a competitor's product. I know that's happened in the past, and I've heard folks complain about that. So what do we need, and how do we accomplish getting actual factual data from these folks? Who wants to dive in there?
Maybe I'll jump in.
Please.
What do we need is a long list of things, actually, and it's probably beyond the scope of our talk over here. But right now, I would say at the top end of the list, top of the marquee, we're finding in all the discussions that we all agree that the first thing that should show up is just how loud does this thing play? This is for the audio side of it. And then how bright, how much light are you getting off the combination of the display system and a screen in the case of a projector. So that's at the top. And right there, right at that simple thing, it's like, look, I know I want to hit so many nits off my screen, or foot Lamberts, or I want to get so many decibels. Just that basic thing, which is the AV equivalent of how fast do you want this car to go. It's hard to do that right now. Just from looking at the data sheets, let's just first assume that the manufacturers are all on the same footing, which they're not. But just assume they were. It is hard right now to go, okay, so I have a room that's this size, and I have a speaker that's this type, and I have an amp that's that type. How do I connect all this to know that I'm going to hit 105 decibels per channel, for example? It's hard. So that's one example of a thing we're trying to put together. And that's pretty important. Some clients want it stupid loud. Some clients don't want it that loud. And we should be designing for what they want and for what either the budget or the expectation is. So that's one thing, is how loud or how bright in the case of video. I would say the next layer right behind that is the grade of performance. There's like a litany of things in there. But I would say on the audio side, there's this thing called frequency response, which can be measured many different ways for amplifiers and speakers. And then on the video side, how accurate you are to the primaries and secondaries with different standards. Both of those things that I described on the audio and video side are relatively well understood in terms of how to measure them. There are labs where you can go measure those, or you can get test equipment that measures that for these days, not that much money. So what the concept behind all of this effort is to start with everybody just being honest, if possible, and reporting things in the right way. And sometimes in the best of your efforts, you may not realize as a manufacturer that you're measuring it wrong. For that purpose, there are test laboratories around the world that are accredited, that follow the right standards. You can send your product over there and have it tested for really ultimately not that much money. A few $1,000s will test an amp, a speaker, things like that. So the long answer to your short question was there's a long list of things that we're working through right now. All, like was stated, the brightest minds of the industry are getting together twice a week now on conference calls and sharing ideas and experiences and information, sharing their science. And then the test methodologies, a lot of which actually already exist in different organizations, are things that we're going to ask people to adhere to. And ultimately, it's a voluntary effort. It does rely on honesty and just self-disclosure. And if somebody wants to go get the thing tested somewhere, they can send it over to a proper lab.
Very good, Walt.
All right, I just wanted to continue to sharpen that point. The group is made up of manufacturers, integrators, acousticians, what I call technology people. Those are people like that do things like, protocols like Dolby or DTS or something like that. So there's a wide representation of thought that's going into this. And there's also a desire to keep it as concise as possible. So one of the challenges as we go through these lists is figuring out the must-haves and then the nice-to-haves, and then that delineation we're really working hard on, because we know testing costs money, and we want to try to whittle it down to the absolute. Look, we got to have these 10 things, or we can't design properly. So that's another one of our challenges, but that is being done. And I just want to make sure we went over the breadth of. There's a lot of great breadth of knowledge that's on all these efforts as well.
And all this informs TCD ultimately, right? I mean, all of this information gets loaded into the CDA designer at the end of the day, and hopefully the platform can keep up with all this data that it's now got to process. I'm sure that's something that Ian and Guy are adjusting constantly, correct, Guy?
We are. We're trying to stay ahead of the curve, and there's a lot of changes coming. Walt's mentioned things like the Cinema Grades effort, plus the RP22 effort. You tag onto that performance facts. It will, inevitably mean a different look and feel and a different flow to TCD. Obviously, TCD now talks about, Media Room Pro, Cinema Room Pro. It talks about these levels which don't really have a basis in metrics, but more in a kind of an understandable terminology for most integrators. But the hope being, once this is finished, the idea will be that you say, I would like to design a room at this level. And hopefully achieve this performance objective. And we've got the data that will help support that design. So it's meaning a bit of an overhaul our end, but hopefully we're ahead of the curve a little bit, largely for the fact I'm on a few of these groups and I can see how it's all panning out.
Right. And I know there's been discussions about moving away from here's a media room, here's a dedicated cinema, Walt, to multi-channel audio rooms being the classification, but we still are going to use those terms, the traditional terms in TCD, at least for the time being. So how are you squaring all that? I mean, that's got to be a heck of a discussion that you guys are having.
It ended up not being a big discussion. Once we all talked about it, the monikers really aren't that important. And this was really driven home when I went to the, when you could go to trade shows, which you'll be able to again in September, which Thankfully. Is great.
Yeah.
When I went to the Munich high-end show, took a little side trip to a little camera company called Arri. I don't know, they make half decent little cameras that they film some amazing movies like The Revenant without any outside lighting whatsoever. And they had a pool table in the middle of their mixing stage. So who's to say that a media room, a room we used to call a media room or an all-purpose room, couldn't outperform a dedicated cinema. The names don't mean anything. And in fact, we found that they just throw everybody off. So we've gotten rid of all the names. RP22 doesn't reference cinema or home theater or anything. It's multi-channel audio room design. And CEB23, which is currently its video counterpart, will also lose that as well because spaces are being used for everything. So it actually ended up being a blessing because it just kind of cleared the air. I think everyone is happy to be gone with all these terms.
Outstanding. I know you guys are constantly revising and developing TCD, as we mentioned. So there's new versions all the time. What is in the most recent version, and what are you working on for the next version? Who wants to jump on that? Either Guy or Ian.
Go ahead, Guy. Go ahead and tell them the most recent changes, and then I think it would be pretty exciting if you're ready to release to the world the media room renders discussion.
Ooh, breaking news! I love it.
So obviously, we're constantly looking at little changes. We've been working with, manufacturers for some white label versions. I don't know whether that's applicable for this discussion, but we've also looked at line source. We've looked at different, seating applications. We've done some minor subtle changes in the background constantly that have kept TCD just evolving, but largely and for the most part, we've been kind of doing a little bit of the legwork in the background. So knowing that performance facts is going to come, knowing that the grades is going to be here, we've tried to look at in-room renders for, I'm going to use the term media room because I guess that's the term that TCD currently uses, but currently the only renders that are available in the true cinema sense of the word. So if you select a cinema room or a cinema room pro, then you get the renders at the end. We've been trying to work a way of bringing in performance facts into an in-room loudspeakered render. So if you can imagine the loudspeaker that we place in the room will have polar plots, or it will have, other characteristics which are identifiable in a graphical sense of the word. So we've been bringing in some CAD drawings of loudspeakers. We've been showing off-axis response. We've been showing, lots of little things that are going to help, CEDIA designers and integrators and cinema designers, choose the right project, the right loudspeaker, for instance, for the right job. So it sounds easy, but obviously those loudspeakers in the room aren't all rendered. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of loudspeakers in TCD. So it does mean going back and backfilling all of those, rewriting some of the look and the feel of it, rewriting the order of it. So instead of just coming in at the project name and those kind of things, looking at the level that we want to design at and then moving through there. So I wouldn't say a ground up overhaul, but it certainly meant, quite a lot of work our end, knowing, the things that Anthony are working on and the things that RP22 and the R10 stuff is coming in. And really, I would say, I don't like to give time frames, but I've just said to Ian, look, hopefully we're going to get most of this in line for what we consider to be Expo. So that's kind of our goal. Just really waiting for some of the output from some of these working groups to hit us, and as soon as it hits us, we implement some of it.
Ian first, and then Walt. Ian.
Well, and on top of that, I'm throwing countless manufacturers at Guy every week. I think we have usually 1 to 2 phone calls with manufacturer per week. We're getting a lot of traction, adding a lot more products. It's getting really exciting with some of the new companies like Meyer Sound. We've got updates from big names all over the industry. It's great.
This is important too, because this is not a one-way street as far as information goes. This is a feedback loop that then tells the manufacturers what's being used where, right, Ian?
Yeah, I mean it's totally a two-way. It's a partnership really with the manufacturers. We can't just scrape their data off their website. It requires them to send us very detailed information that Guy and his team then enter in, including CAD drawings, 3D renderings. And then on top of that, manufacturers that are interested can see how their products are being used and get that feedback to additionally make their products even better. Yeah,
that's a pretty key thing, I think, here that we don't talk enough about. is that feedback loop is going to improve the products because they're getting data about how they're getting installed in the real world, how these systems are getting designed in the real world. It's real world use case scenarios that they can then draw from, right?
Absolutely. And we're now averaging, we're getting close to averaging 4,000 projects a year average. It's just growing on a daily basis. And that information, to getting back to the manufacturers, such and such speaker is being used in these configurations with this size of room volume with this seat configuration. It really helps them define out how integrators in the CDA channel and the industry are using their products.
With the data that you're collecting, Ian, are you seeing one specific level of cinema or media room really become the winner, become the dominant? Have you gotten any data on what the most popular budget for these things is these days?
That is a better question. I'm going to defer to Guy because he's looking at that data every single day.
All right.
Or maybe configuration Guy.
Oh, okay. That makes sense too.
Because we don't deal in sort of pricing budget,
Got
it's
it.
difficult. But I do look at, things like in-wall, on-wall, in-room. I do look at room volume in meters cubed. I do look at screen sizes because that's a fairly good indication of, of the kind of size and scope of the theatre. So we've got a really good idea of, hey, if you were a manufacturer and you were going to build a room of this cubic volume, this many subs, I could probably tell you that I'm going to say 11 to 13 channels is probably the sweet spot, but everybody knows why, because that's the sort of the DSP limit for discretely rendered channels. So there are some of those that's fairly low hanging fruit. What we don't do is cross-pollinate other data with other manufacturers, so we're quite discreet about who can see what. They can only see their own data. Right. That's always a key thing because CDA have to remain brand agnostic and they have to be the custodians of this data, I believe, in a responsible way, and they're definitely doing that. So the data retrieval portal, I think that the granularity of the data is incredible, but we're constantly tweaking that as well. So to be honest, when we first did TCD, we never really gave that much of a thought. I have to be honest. It was only after years, sort of 2 or 3, you really realize how many designs are coming in, how many dealers are actually using the products. And the projects, like Ian said, 4,000. I don't know what we've got now, just under 5,000. How many integrators? I think there's something like
we're creeping up on 6,000 user accounts.
6,000 integrators.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So, it's become quite a sizable beast, really. There's quite a lot of data swilling around in there, and how we extract that and how we present that is probably still evolving.
Well, you had your hand up a while ago. I know you wanted to.
I was just going to say, while Guy is waiting for consensus-driven output to input into the tool, we also have the same goal of September for the phase 1 of Performance Facts, which is just amps and speakers, and then the public comment release of RP22.
A question that has been asked by people who are smarter than I: why do you need to have some training at designing cinemas without TCD in order to use TCD? Why is that important? Why is it important to have an understanding of all these concepts and having done it manually before you use the tool?
I mean, from my point of view, I look at people like Anthony, and there are other, cinema designers at that skill and experience level. And it's all very well, hearing these numbers, but unless you've got both underpinning knowledge, and that is some formal qualifications in doing this, and experience, and I'm not sure how many rooms Anthony's designed, but it's thousands, I think, Anthony. Is that right? I mean, Anthony talks about, literally hundreds or thousands of final rooms that have been completed. There's no substitute for that level of experience. And TCD will tell you, hey, the speaker should be here, and this is this many foot lamberts, or this many candelas per meter squared, or this much SPL, or this. But unless you've done any kind of background training, those numbers don't really mean much. And understanding what a good number is, and understanding, if a loudspeaker is off axis, then what's that going to do to it? Understanding, how seat-to-seat uniformity and how bass works, low frequencies work in small rooms. And TCD isn't necessarily a magic wand. It's just a vehicle that will help you get to the first level quicker. it still requires an enormous amount of skill and experience, to make some sense of those. And that's where, and this is not a plug, but CEDIA training or, other training is just so important. I mean, that's from my point of view. That's how I feel.
All right. What kind of training tools do you have now available? Anything new?
For TCD, we've got, I believe, 7 this year. We'll have 7 webinars.
Nice.
Are going to be live and free for anyone. 2 will be in Spanish. We already had 1 in Spanish. We'll have 2 to cover the APAC region, and then we're going to have some for the U.S. We've also got a course inside of our LMS, the CEDIA Academy. It's under the resources section, and it's completely free for anyone that has an account. And then we're going to have 2 live training sessions under manufacturer product training at Expo. And not only will those be a walkthrough of the tool, but we'll actually have the students will be able to get hands-on testing and be able to run through it themselves, which we've not done before. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, we always, again, like Guy said, that basic knowledge, going through, CEDIA, CIT, IST track pathways. There are lots of other books and courses out there, but would definitely recommend some sort of a baseline knowledge so that you have that understanding.
Terrific. Walt.
Yeah, I wanted to throw the softball to Anthony. I wanted him to also chime in on that question you threw to Guy, because experience has a heck of a lot to do with it, and TCD does help you get off and running, and automates a lot of processes that would take someone a ton of time to do. But there's this little thing called room acoustics and construction and how you place things that it does not touch on, like experience and knowledge touches on, and also RP22 touches on that a bit. So Anthony, can you get into that just a tad bit?
Yeah, to state the name of one of my favorite movies, it's complicated. So here's what we do and other expert designers do in the beginning of a project. Actually, the first thing is learn the client. You got to figure out what's in their dream. You got to do that. And TCD doesn't replace that. You got to go out and ask questions. Next thing is, once you have those questions and the data, we sit down in front of a giant spreadsheet that has about 30 tabs in which we start to what I call model the room. We put the dimensions, we put things like seat screens, and it's highly interactive. We took 20 years to develop, and it keeps changing the spreadsheet so that in the end, we actually have a set of data points that go, okay, given what this client has as a room and their desire and their dream, here's some engineering information that tells us these are the kinds of speakers we need, the kind of screen we need, where the seats need to be, what the risers need to be, all the stuff. And it takes us better part of 4 or 5 hours internally to do that. That's not the design yet. That's just data. That's what TCD gives you, is great data. So TCD shortcuts are, I'll be honest. It takes us 5 hours to do this. TCD does it in what? 10 minutes, Guy? Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's essentially a wonderful, super powerful robot with a lot of capacity in it that can give you all this data from which you can start the design. What do you do next? Well, now you have TCD puts out these nice pictures that are conceptual and this rendering that's conceptual. That's not the room yet. And what that does is give you enough data that you can go back to the client and go, this is what we're going to need to do to make you happy. You like it? Good. Now let's go do a plan. Let's go build the room and let's do it right. And either you know how to do that, because like us, you've done it 1,000 times. It's about that. 1,012, I think, is where we are right now. Or you've done it 500 times, or you're new to it. You got to go. You either have experience of doing it or you go learn how to do it. And that's where the CEDIA education program comes in that says, okay, now that you have this data, what do you do with it? What do the walls look like? Where do you put the screen? How do you hang the projector? How do you wire the thing? How do you do the pre-wire? How do you do the programming? All of that how-to is part of what you got to learn, or you've learned because you've been doing this for a long time. You learned from others. You've been an apprentice, whatever it takes. So I look at TCD as a really, really important guidance tool, sort of a navigation tool. It's like it's the GPS that tells you this is how you go. If you don't know how to drive a car, a GPS is not going to be very useful. You got to have both.
Nice.
Very good. Well,
you like that analogy. Okay.
I do like that. And I just want to give away one other little tidbit on the education side. One very interesting section in RP22, which nobody, to my knowledge, has really talked about is just placement of speakers behind a screen, and how soft domes behave versus horns, and how vinyl screens interact versus woven. There's a whole section on that. Genius stuff. But again, if you don't know, you could cause yourself a whole bunch of problems by not knowing how all those things interact and how to use them.
While we've got Guy and Anthony on the same podcast, this is a prime time to ask for some real world cases. I'm interested. I've seen a lot of your work, Anthony. I've seen some of your work, Guy. I see a lot of Anthony's work because Audio Images wins awards. And then, I have to look at the pretty pictures and see the plans and everything that I know Anthony's been helping out with. Guy is waving me off angrily. But Anthony, I've seen you overcome a lot of really difficult spaces where there was glass and there's a bank vault in one whole side of the room taking up space where speakers should be. So what is the most challenging room you ever think you had to confront?
Oh, the most challenging room.
Did I put you on the spot?
Boy, there's quite a few of those.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a two-part answer to that.
Right on.
I think there's 3 or 4 of them where things started off just really challenging because they were either, in one case, imposed rules by the architecture and the historical nature of the room, where you couldn't change some things. You kind of had to work around it. And then, other rooms are the type where, it's all glass and marble and you have to do this, and then you have to get really creative. And one of those actually was a CEDIA finalist, they call it. Didn't make number 1, made number 2. And one of those was like, the architect and designer had an idea for what the thing looked like, and both from an acoustical point of view and acoustics and speaker placement point of view and a video projection point of view was like, can't do that. And then, through a lot of creativity, we got to a room that actually sounds really, really amazing. So the second part of that is working around those limitations is experience. So our design tool, or TCD or another design tool, can't figure out how to work around those creative challenges. And it would be kind of like, getting back to the analogy of the car. So you got the GPS, you got the car, you kind of know how to drive. Suddenly you're confronted with a road that's got snow and ice and mud, and your windshields aren't working. Now you got to get creative about how you're driving, and you still got to get to where you're trying to go pretty much alive. And a junior driver, somebody who's had their driver's license for 6 months, is probably going to end up with that car into the snowbank. And a driver with a lot of experience with knowing how to get around those challenges is maybe going to survive that really difficult condition. Is that car analogy working for you guys?
Love it. Yep.
So it's a bit the same when you're doing design, which is that, I don't know how often we get given an ideal condition, rectangular space, there's no limitations. Probably not that often.
Right.
Most people who are listening to this are going to go, yeah, so rarely do you actually have carte blanche, which means white card, which you can do whatever you want. Most times there are limitations, and it's a combination of science, which is design tools like TCD, together with creativity and experience. That's going to get you in the end to a result that the client goes, yeah, I love this. Thank you very much. Here's your final check.
All right. Guy, thoughts on this one?
I think if you just follow, almost keep it simple. So I go through this process all the time where I just have those marginal incremental gains where I manage the seating properly. I try to manage the screen. I'm looking at every, bite-sized piece of data a little bit at a time. And then hopefully when you get to the end, your margin of error, if you like, or the amount of creativity that you need, it's still going to be there, but it's probably, you've managed your universe as well as you can. And I guess, I just try and keep it simple, look at every individual element of that project. And, I've had some projects which are really challenging, and I do look at now and think, goodness knows how we even got sound and picture out of some of them. But I think just keep it simple, keep it to basics. Some of it is science, as Anthony said, some of it is art, and you just cannot, there is no substitute for experience. And it doesn't matter what tool, what spreadsheet, what CAD drawing, there is no substitute from experience. And, cinemas are not built on spreadsheets. They are built by really smart people who have got years and years and years of experience. And I just don't think there's much substitute for that
Terrific.
level of it.
Terrific. What are we forgetting before we wrap it up? Ian, any parting thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah. I was thinking, all of what we're talking about, these new standards, the performance facts, the cinema grades, TCD, it's all to elevate the industry, and it's all to give people information and the tools to just give a better experience for their customers. And I know there's a lot of information on this podcast, and we're talking about a lot of new things that are launching, but there will be this, all of these standards will be looped into the CD education in the long run. Some really exciting things about us changing up we're still in the process of it, so it's not fixed yet, but we're changing up possibly the awards to, instead of doing price categories, to look at doing the actual grades and the levels, so that it is more subjective of the performance and not about the price. And again, once all of this, it's really, everything is just coming together, and it's a beautiful thing how we're seeing it all manage. And the hard work that Guy and Tony and Walt are doing is by the end of this year, I say around Expo time, we're going to see some really big announcements and some just really great opportunities happening.
Guy is tugging on his shirt collar just a little bit, just like a little bit of sweating going on there. Anthony, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'm gonna second what Ian says. This whole effort is, sometimes people are sort of poo-poo. It's like standards. Oh my God, the great thing about them, there's just so many you can choose from. It's like no. This whole effort is to help you guys, the CEDIA member, do a better job and have less uncertainty and know that you can deliver what it is that you're committing to deliver, and in doing that, elevate you above the people who don't know what they're doing, because then you can actually represent your client. You're going to do it. You can show the certificates. You can maybe talk a little bit about the process, but ultimately, in both your sales phase, you can talk about the fact that you're going to do this technically and scientifically. You have all these, tools. And then also as you're delivering the project, this thing's going to work because I've used all of these guidelines and I have all this data, and I have a good certainty that I won't be blowing up tweeters. So I've been into lots of rooms where people are like, well, this sounds okay. I don't really understand the dialogue. It's okay, whatever. You want to take a look. I show up, the tweeter's blown on the center speaker. Why did the tweeter blow? Well, because the room's too big for the amplification and loudspeaker size of that tweeter, or for how much that client likes to crank it up. So who's replacing the tweeter? Well, typically it's the CEDIA member who's replacing the tweeter at their own cost, because most clients don't want to, honor the warranty thing. So what we're saying is no more of that. Just make sure that you have the right data, that you can deliver the thing to the client that you can deliver to represent that on your road from here to there won't be snow and ice, so you don't crash your car into the snowbank, and just make your life easier so you can go home earlier and enjoy your dinner with your family sooner.
Very good. We'll leave the last word with Guy Singleton. Guy, anything to add?
I think just, they're all tools, aren't they? Everything we use is tools, TCD or any of that, but there is just no substitute really by I've learned more from these standards groups just by listening to some smart people and being on the calls, and I just make notes and I take it away with me and make sure I'm prepared for TCD. And I just would implore those people to get involved as well. I think I echo what Walt said. If there are people out there that feel strongly enough about this industry and passionate enough about this industry, to give your time and to come on these calls, you'll learn far more. You'll take away far more than possibly you give. I know I do. So.
Totally.
Marvelous. There's one more thing that Walt wanted to mention before we wrap this up. Walt got a text message from Guy Singleton, from Mr. Guy Singleton the other night, that he'd like to share with the class regarding a famous client.
Here's what I read the other night. Spoke to Peter Jackson last night. For the first time ever, he said, why don't you let me write you a testimonial or a reference? Okay, because he did Peter Jackson's theater.
After COVID, I'd spoken to Wingnut and Josie, who's Peter's PA, and he said, "How you doing?" And he just said, "We can write you a testimonial." I'd always been held down. I mean, Anthony knows what it's like. You're always held down by NDAs, and I had this thing. I wasn't even allowed to mention his gender. It just said, the client. I couldn't say he or him. It was just a bizarre kind of scenario that I was bogged down in. And about a week ago, they agreed that they would write me a testimonial and send it through to me. So Nothing happened. I was like an expectant father for a few days, just pacing around. And then, because obviously they're New Zealand, one came in at about sort of 4 or 5 in the morning. So I've got to be honest. I know it's not. Anthony's probably thinking, yeah, that's okay. But for me, I'm a minnow in this world. So for me, it was just brilliant to get that.
Guy, you keep saying that. Stop saying that.
Yeah.
Enough.
You're a very learned man, and you do amazing
You're a
stuff.
big deal.
You're a big deal.
I'm not really.
You are. But officially in this group, I say you are a big deal.
Oh yeah.
I'm probably not good enough to carry Anthony's bags, really, but I'll take it from you guys. But the phrase they said to me was really quite nice, and I did have a little proud moment for a minute. So we can actually officially put it on our website, and we can officially say it, whereas we couldn't before. So, excellent. And I also did Matthew Dravitsky, who did the Kingsman. So that I did his. So he's married to Claudia Schiffer. I did theirs as well. So so when you talk about it's how the artist intended or how the director intended, I can assure you, I've worked for 2 directors, and I'd be surprised if either of them intended anything.
I don't know too many. I don't know too many minnows that get to hang out with Claudia Schiffer, dude.
Claudia Schiffer actually made me a sandwich and a glass of milk. That's a true story, though.
It's good to be the minnow. It's good to be the minnow.
She made me a sandwich.
But they were
and a glass of milk.
She was so nice. But Peter Jackson's just so nice. And obviously he's married to Fran Walsh, the producer as well. And then at his house, he gets lots of people stay there, like Ian McClellan, and Gandalf stays there, and so do the dwarfs, and so his house is always kind of busy around Pinewood Studios. So anyway, enough about me. You guys, stop it.
Claudia Schiffer made me a sandwich is one of the golden moments.
Yes.
That is true. But they were filming. I think they were filming the Kingsman #2 then.
Oh my god!
So they were a bit fraught, but that's pretty good.
Claudia Schiffer made me a sandwich is one of the all-time.
They were the days, eh? They were the days.
Guy Singleton is the inventor of TCD, and he's also taking care of it for us. Anthony Grimani is with PMI. Thank you so much for the time, gentlemen. We really appreciate it today.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Ian Bryant with Cedia. Thanks for the time, buddy.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Ed.
Good to see you. And Walt Zerby, thank you, sir.
Always fun, Ed.
This is the Cedia Podcast. My name is Ed Wank. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the future.
For more information on Cedia, visit cedia.net.